So my talk is going to be about our experience in working with some heritage organizations. So I'm coming from a much more practical point of view, and trying to convey the messages we got from this institution rather than having a much more technological approach. So in my presentation, when I talk about cultural heritage institutions, I'm referring to galleries, museums, libraries, archives, and so on. So obviously, as you know, galleries provide spaces for exhibition of visual arts, sculptures, furniture, textiles, and so on. Museums conserves collection of artifacts. Those artifacts could be scientific, artistic, cultural, historical, and so on. The range of objects that we're talking about. On the other hand, libraries again provide additional information in terms of books, periodical, newspapers, films, and maps, and so on. Archives are the things that we are not in exhibit, but they are kind of archived away at a more permanent or long-term preservation purposes. Within this institution, usually you have, especially like museums or galleries, a curator. The curator is could be one or team of curators depending on the size of the organization, and they are the content specialists responsible for an institution's collection and involved with the interpretation of heritage material. So they decide what is going into the exhibition and to the museum and so on. So as a visitor, so we go obviously with the general public, we're interested in learning more about heritage. So that within context, what you're talking about is this two types of users. The curator who create the content, visitor receiving that content. So when you look at the traditional model of engagement, what we see is the curator usually decides what contents to go into that particular museum. So the gallery or museums could be represented here, are represented as organization and one and organization two. So organization one, usually if you take any museum, they are specialized in the content. So it could be art, it could be arts for a particular artist because of there's so much content. So they specialize in a subset of themes, if you like. And within that organization, what you have is archives. So this is archives away. The curator is the person who would bring those materials into the exhibition area and decide what is going to be displayed. Organization two will have a similar system, led by the curator, bringing data from material from that exhibition area, and then we receive as visitors what is given to us. So that's the traditional model of engagement. So however, there are drivers for modernizing this traditional model. So the one aspect is one of the challenges those organizations are facing at the moment is how can we maintain the user interest? If the user is not really continuously coming into that place, obviously it becomes an empty place, and then it becomes difficult for them to justify their existence. So that means their interest is to make sure users engage in a much more interesting way. They keep coming back to the new content and so on. At the same time, they're interested in looking at how do they enhance this engagement. Yeah, so how can we make sure rather than just receiving it, can they become more active person? Can they become the curators? So that means really changing the model where the curators, rather than curators giving, the visitors can also become the contributor of knowledge. So so one of the thinking coming from this existing organizations now. The other aspect is how can we have, rather than having a limited access within the exhibition area, how can we provide a great access to the archive? So that means obviously there are lots of organizations going through the digitization process of digitizing the artifacts into digital form. So that means providing a great access to the content. And also when it comes to a particular theme, let's imagine that in, for example, Salford, we have a local artist called Lowry, where his arts are in Lowry Gallery, in Salford Keys, Tate Galleries, but those artifacts are distributed across organizations. So if we are organizing a theme, how can we provide this kind of distributed way of handling visitor interaction by connecting these existing organizations? So again, that's quite important to make sure that the theme is properly supported with all the knowledge available across the world. So that means ability to support teams across organizations needs to be think about how they support that, interoperability issues, interfaces, and so on. At the same time, you think about, it's all about, you also use the word this culture-led regeneration. So can we bring visitors, tourists into your local area so that it's not you're trying to promote one organization, but you're trying to promote a range of organizations within that space, a local space, so that visitors will come to that place to visit all these places. So how do you bring that? And also, when you go to a institution, the cultural institution, you have materials without the context. So how this is linked to the space and time. What can we bring context using digital technology is another challenge. So these are, as we see through our conversation, we see these are the kind of challenges that we need to think about in creating technology, a new form of interfaces for these organizations. So I think it will be good to understand different views, the user view and the content view. This particular diagram show is this research done by Maurice Hargreaves, McIntyre Consultancy. We're trying to identify the behavior of the visitor. So the behavior goes from type 1 to type 4, type 4 being the most advanced visitor. So the browser type visitor, when you come to a place like art gallery or museums, they are just randomly going from one object to another. So they decide where to go, and then they need a bit of an explanation about what it is. Yeah? So they haven't got a particular aim, they're wandering around that particular space. The second type of users are the followers. They come here, they're coming there for a particular theme. So the theme could be, for example, the arts of a particular artist. Yeah, could be one of the themes. So they come here, they think, oh, that's interesting to understand a bit more, but this is given by the museums, but they also need some explanation. The third type is the people who are searchers, the searchers who are interested in exploring more information, but they are still following the data or the themes presented by the museum. The searcher is going from one particular theme to another particular theme in another museum, but they're exploring a kind of theme concepts, yeah, from one to another. Researcher is where these are more advanced users, where they want more specific technical knowledge, how this particular object was made, how this particular painting was painted. So they're going to much more detailed. So that means if you are looking at then technology, you need to understand the user, how you want to really engage with these different types of user. From the museum point of view, if you are the museum, you want to turn these browsers into followers and searchers. Because as you can see, these are the type of users that they follow the museum's themes. Yeah? And the researcher is obviously more technical, academically oriented person. So this is where museums would like to really build up their client base, if you like. So again, you need to understand then when you develop in technology, why do they engage? What do they engage with? How they engage? So for example, as presented in this table, why they engage: browser is wandering around, follower is looking at particular themes, narratives, searcher is again looking for particular objects of interest, researcher at the same time they want more information about objects, but they are going from one museum to another to get more linked up information, publications about the particular artifacts. Content they are looking here is, if you have a browser, enough to look at, admire, understand, not so much in depth. Here, follow is again enough to develop the themes, understand a kind of a much more broad range, so that you, rather than object level, they understand a life story of, let's say, I don't know, Lowry or different architects, different artists. Here, you're talking about more detailed information about the theme. Search, again, as I said, is what more physical and technical data. Again, we want to understand how can we provide that information to provide a better experience, better emotional experience with this artifact. So if you are a browser, think about how can we bring interactive systems to appeal to their senses, so it attracts them to say, oh, that's interesting, and then try to get them more interested to become a follower. Yeah, the followers obviously looking for more detail. They need more information in terms of graphics, VR, animations to understand more about a particular theme. The searcher is the same, and the researcher is looking at much more, not just visualization, much more technical information. Yeah. So that's the user view. So understanding the user is quite important. Then second one is what sort of content we're talking about. So the different types of contents depending on the museum. So it has paintings, sculptures, from art's point of view, scientific specimen, historic objects, zoological specimen, books, periodicals, and so on. So a range of things. So go from 2D to video animations to 3D objects and so on. That different types of things. But one of the limitation, the constraint within this museum is some of these artifacts need to be preserved and in special environments, protected from light, humidity fluctuation, and so on, so that when you go to the museum, you can't touch it. So how can we really make sure that you can provide interactive access to the audience? So this is one of the main challenge. So as we see it, so in terms of research, when you're looking at how can we really bring these museums to alive in a sense or interactive, these are sort of research question you need to explore. One is how can we allow unconstrained interactive access to different types of heritage materials, so you can bring it from this special environment into a 3D environment where people can interact with biological specimens to very precious artifacts like arts or physical materials. How can we allow citizens to be the curators? Because one of the model, as I said before, the curator decide what the theme is going to be. Can the citizen themselves as a community decide they're going to do exhibition of something, a particular theme? How can we change this thing around? How can develop narrative environments that can allow communities, local communities, to contribute to the content? Because currently, the current system doesn't allow people to really contribute what they know, what they found, back into that historical place. So that is all defined by the curator, but the scholars cannot provide to really build up that kind of additional knowledge into that. So that means how can we build this kind of a storytelling environment? How can we develop playful interfaces so that it becomes much more interesting? Like the last interface is more playful so that it attracts people to come and try to interact with that. Other aspect is the context is missing in the lots of heritage material. So there are lots of explained in a text, but it doesn't really allow you to understand, for example, scientific phenomena when you're representing a scientific object, how it is involved, and if it is a historical object, when it was used, can we bring that into life in using the graphical media? And how can we build technology platform that can allow us to develop a story of a place? So it's not just about a building. Sometimes when you put that building within the economic context, you're trying to tell us a story about the whole particular city and attract tourism. So the question we need to ask is, what is the role of visualization and interaction within these challenges? So what I'm trying to do is actually, given that context, these are the things that we have at the back of our mind, but at the same time, it's too much to handle. So we do prototypes by working with several partners. So the way this is our conceptual view of a proposed digital framework for this institution. So basically, you need to have some sort of asset management systems which allows you to catalog your objects and also provide additional information from your citizens and so on. And there are certain systems already, as indicated here, but we also have our own research prototype asset management system. Then the next challenge is how do you communicate using 2D interfaces, 3D interfaces, multi-touch tables, mobile interfaces, to power 3D TV, and so on. So here are some examples that we've done in the past. So the first challenge is looking at when you have millions and millions of artifacts, how do you really provide access to those materials using metadata searching? I'm sure this is, you can't really see clearly, but what I'm trying to say is these are kind of a metadata. Let's imagine you have metadata attached to each object, digital object in the digital asset management system. By clicking on, for example, the time or the particular type of materials you're looking for, particular artists, by clicking them, this becomes suddenly, it goes into the database, bring that materials from different distributed databases and allows you to catalog them. And then this is some of the examples that we've done in the past where people can quickly really understand what is in the archives. The second things we explored is how do you really turn the existing digital asset management system into storytelling. So narrative environments for citizens. So here the idea is what people are talking about a storytelling. Yeah, so that every object has a story to be told. Whether it's a painting or the historical object, there's a story behind it. So the stories could be defined as different types of objects. Yeah, the story, obviously, in order to tell a story, you have a community, you define the set of members that you engage in telling that story, and then it has categories of stories. The people who are engaged in telling the story, and the story has a place, which it took place. It has the time, fuzzy time. Most of the times it's not the exact time. The time is important. The media that you use to tell a story, which is text, pictures, video, and so on. So the underlying data model needs to somehow allow you to build that kind of narrative from the community. So you take an object, you build up that community using this narrative environment. So this is another project that we're doing, trying to look at how this citizens could engage in really bringing their knowledge and discussing and making more interesting to build up community within this institution. Another aspect is, as you know, when you go to museums and so on, there are physical objects. Obviously, it has selected objects, as I said. But here, the idea here is this using a Microsoft Surface table or Surface table by throwing a physical tag. So this has a QR tag at the back. By throwing that onto the table, it will bring relevant material from your digital asset management system, so that you can bring that, you can explore that particular image. Could be, in this case, is Mona Lisa, but you can really see what other people have said about this particular artifact, and you can provide your own thoughts about what you think about that particular artifacts and so on. So this is about really trying to get people to engage, providing a contribution, at the same time building almost like a special interest group about that particular artifact. So this could be, again, combined with a particular artist, and then develop a dialogue with the community around that. And also, let's imagine that you want to create a TV programs where you want to discuss about a particular subjects. It could be a particular theme and so on. The project we've done here is to really see how the TV presenter, when you're communicating those ideas to the audience, how through social networks that they can provide contributions to that discussion. So that when you're talking about that, they can really say what they upload their pictures, their understanding, or they ask questions, so that you can begin to build up much more interactive two-way communication with a mass audience in terms of really running TV programs around heritage type topics. It's another example. The other aspect is, then here we looked at how can we promote a place rather than a building as a place, as a visitor destination, engaging local communities as well as bringing other people. How can we bring develop ludic, the playful interfaces based on Kinect and multi-touch? So the idea here is, this was based around Media City in Salford Keys. As you know, the local stakeholders spend millions of pounds to create this Media City in Salford Keys, and then this project that trying to demonstrate how we can connect different types of Media City through a kind of gaming environment. So here, what you are looking at is these are kind of like a Stargates type portal. So you go into, in this particular case, you can go to UK Media City. Once you go through that tunnel, through that gate, you get teleported into the local media city in Salford Keys. Then what you have is a space to be explored. So this space, inside each building, here we have Lowry Gallery, we have the War Museums, we have BBC, we have universities. there are lots of cultural organizations where you can go and explore what is inside that. So this is driven by Connect type interfaces and multi-touch, and then they can wander around and find out what is going on, what is this. These are just examples about the media city, but they then allows you to go into the building and then experience what's going on. You can also see these are multi-user environments, so this is you can really see other people wandering around and then have a discussion about that particular place or particular object, and then promote interaction between the two about the people who are wandering in that particular space. Is another example that you can either use the Connect interface or the multi-touch table to drive through that space. So you can decide to go into a particular thing. So this is a Lowry gallery. Here you can see Lowry paintings and then go into each paintings and find more about the information. So this is an example to really see how a place could be visualized and promoted through virtual and interactive technologies. Other aspect is this was it's called 8 Songs for a Mad King. This project was funded by our Arts Council, and it was in collaboration with a group called SAFA, and the idea is to recreate the life story of George III. At a later stage he had some mental illness, so this is trying to portray how he saw things. So this is fuzzy images, blurred images. At the same time he was trying to teach birds to sing. Yeah, so in this particular, there are famous 8 songs written by Sir Peter Maxwell Davies, and then these are well known. I think there's film as well about this particular song. So here, using virtual reality, what you're trying to do is to bring the context and bring that story to life. Here we use green screen technology, graphical technology, and simulation technology, and so on to recreate that. So the idea here is that the king, the actor, it demonstrates how he go and talk to the birds, and there's sort of songs going behind that, and then trying to portray these 8 songs within this context. So the context is in a cell outside near the Thames. Inside is one of these rooms, library, pub, and so on. And within each area you have kind of metadata trying to explain the history of that place, in how for example, in the pub there are metadata about how the beer was made, for example, and so on. There are lots of historical information now kind of attached within that game environment to explore that space. So while you are exploring that space, you can also, by finding this metadata, meta object, it will give you information, additional information about that particular story. We also explored other aspect is when it comes to science. Scientific aspect, how do you allow people to understand science by bringing physical simulation? So here this is an example again done with BBC. Idea is to introduce children to the science behind volcanic eruption. So the idea here is that we work with volcanologists to understand how the volcano get erupted, understanding the parameters like lava content, gas content, and so on, silica content, and so on. So you need to operate, depending on the level of content that you set up, you can create different types of explosion. There's so many different types of volcanic eruptions that you can create, but it's based on those kind of parameters. So the here idea is that children can go to this island using the Connect interface. 2 guys has to work together to recreate the best eruption, if you like, and then that allows them to understand science behind that. So the idea I'm trying to show is, again, when you go to science museum, you can also bring physics and the kind of engine into that virtual reality environment and make it more playful to bring people into engage with that kind of content. So as you can see, they are initially based on more kind of browser type kind of the people. We are trying to bring interest, to capture their interest, to turn into more followers and searchers, where then they can begin to engage with this kind of institution much more strongly. So I think that's it. That's all I have to say, just to give you a broad range of activities we're doing but this is driven by by working with those institutions and trying to address their concerns. Thank you very much.
You mainly speak about interaction by visualization, and you do not provide any examples in your system where we could have haptic feedbacks and things like that.
Oh, I see, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Since the first interest in museum, about museum in the past was clearly the idea to touch the objects and to be able to get this this feeling, and you do not introduce this modality in your presentation, so I would like to know why.
Yeah,
Is it
yeah,
just because you did not have time for that, or
no, I thought about it because I think there have been so many research in terms of creating 3D virtual objects, interacting with them. I think that's been already done, right? So the question here is to thinking about like where are the current institution today, and what sort of technology we can introduce step by step so that they they understand why this technology has been introduced to change the user behavior, if you like, and then given and also some of the institution scientists have been bringing more younger generation using like Kinect type interfaces where it becomes much more playful rather than touching object. It becomes a gaming, this entertaining kind of aspect. So there's elements that they want to bring, learning from the gaming environment. Can you make it more playful? So as you can see, the haptic is in the science technical laboratories is interesting, but when you're trying to bring that into the common, much more broader audience, probably we need to think about much more reliable, more playful, kind of looking at the audience. So far, the demand from our partners has been to explore this kind of technology. So as I said before, it's driven by the user needs and the user expectation, and then driven by because for example with BBC they have lots of program about science festivals. So they have planned certain weeks. We say we want to get the kids to introduce particular theme. So these are kind of a much more co-creation of technology.
So yes, sure, but indeed it's not so easy, I guess, to provide even with haptic device a good feeling back to the audience. If we just think about textile or things like that, but we look to this kind of museum, then it will be very hard to provide these sensations or this feeling of touching some textile and to navigate in these elements. So I guess that it could be also a very interesting way or direction to analyze what can be done right now with the technology we have about haptic to provide this kind of feeling. But I can understand that it was not the priority.
Yeah, I mean, we have done haptic stuff. For example, with the Science Museum, we did a project where we took some haptic devices to demonstrate, to introduce the technology rather than so you can play with the physics, bouncing balls and throw balls, and so the physics and haptics was introduced in one of the examples. So it was more like a so we've done in the past. I didn't include that in here, but we've done some simple experiments with the Industry and Science Museum in Manchester to introduce this kind of concept of haptics and physics aspects. But I mean, I didn't touch on this haptic side in this particular presentation. I think what I wanted to show is try to understand the user initially, and then really see how we can bring them the content. So the more of the here I focus mainly on the interaction as in 3D direct interaction rather than 3D kind of more haptic feedback. So I kind of didn't include that in this presentation, but I could have, I guess. Yeah.
In doing so, do you mean that the next generation of curators will be mainly webmasters?
Will be what?
Mainly new webmasters, just managing content on the web.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I mean, there's this term called digital curators, isn't it? So obviously they are looking at how can we use the kind of digital technology to create something. But in a way, most of the creators are, I mean, at least our creators are a bit worried about the technology, because that will, in a way, they want people to come to that their place. They don't really want the digital technology to take over, especially going on the web and things like that. So I think that there's a finer balance needs to be struck here, where they need to really see, okay, the people will still come to their building in some form, but they keep coming. But how can they provide much more enhanced experience? They also want to feel like their job is like they are the creator, they are the knowledge provider, and then they need to. It needs to have that discussion needs to take place. I think it is a learning curve from their point of view to really see what is possible from the technology, and also without really diminishing their role. How can we really enhance their current creator activities? It's a challenge, I guess. Yeah, but so I mean, those digital creators are slowly emerging, but from the people what we are working with, they still trying to complement what they're already doing. But I'm sure over time, it will somehow digital curators will play a much more better, deeper role in the curation phase.
Can we come back on the volcanic eruption? Because
yeah.
I think the thing is a little different, because for a museum you want to bring content and to manage content, and here you want to introduce science, so you want to teach someone. Did you change your methods when doing this kind of approach? And
yeah.
do you have feedback of, is it just a video game? Certainly, but what is how it is the science is perceived?
Yeah, all right. So I think here that, because when you say museum, I guess in your mind you might have some historical. Yeah. So the historical one, I think the previous one that we, sorry, I'm going the wrong direction. So you can think about presenting physical artifacts. You can laser scan. What we've done in the past, you laser scan, you bring the 3D kind of stuff. That's kind of done to death for last 10, 15 years. Yeah. So what is the reason I brought this one is to the two elements. One is how do you bring the context? Yeah. So if you go to the science museum or historical museum, most of the things lacks the context. So how do you? So the volcanic exploration. The reason I decided to present this one is it's a good example to really show how scientific kind of mathematical models or the phenomena could be. So if you go into science kind of museum, you might be looking at let's say airflow kind of stuff. You might be looking at the aeroplane aspect, how the aeroplane flies. Then you want to show the airflow aspect, the physics behind that. So this one I'm trying to bring the role of virtual reality could play by creating that context. So here this could be a natural museum aspects where people trying to look at different kind of nature aspects. So here this is a good example where that kind of phenomena, the context could be brought into a 3D environment. So it's not so much about, interaction aspect. So the historical aspect, the reason I brought the George III is, so you go to a historical thing. So obviously we see 3D artifacts, you see the physical objects. It's fine. It could be rescan, bring it to 3D virtual world. But what's the next thing is to bring those objects to life. Yeah, creating. So it's not really, it's telling a story. I think that's what I'm thinking about. Yeah, how do you tell a story of a object, of a story of a person? A story. You see the painting of George III, and then you see different portrait, and so how you really tell a story of that place so that people get it. So this is bringing. How do you bring that kind of artifacts to life is the reason. So I've tried to think about this as you can see, simulating context via VR is a different aspect. So you engaged, trying to go more deeper into the content through visual means. So it's I don't know. that was the kind of
I
idea.
understand. So it's not so different. It's
No.
not so different. When you use simulation to present eruption, it's not to learn to show the science or to explain clearly the science. It's to bring people to be aware of that there is existing something and they want to go further.
Yeah. For example, yeah, exactly. For example, I mean, this particular one for kids, you know, like, so the kids want to know why didn't I get a good eruption? Because you think if you increase the lava content, gas content, and or crystal content, I'll get the biggest explosion. But it doesn't work like that. So you need to go back and read more. Why my friend got a bigger eruption than me, and then you know how much points I got. So that really build up the appetite about learning. So being a browser, turning into a searcher, and is a kind of a behavioral change that you need to do through kind of media. So you're trying to think about, okay, I need to go and find out next time when I go there, I need to get a better eruption, volcanic eruption. So it's like really building that kind of appetite and turning the behavior is a part of that.
I was wondering if the systems created can be intelligent in any way. For example, are they or can the system be able to capitalize the user interaction, in fact, in order to be for their own behavior?
Yeah. I would say even depending on the behavior that it will know that you are a follower or a searcher. Is that what you mean?
For example, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, then you need to track. That's interesting research, I must say, because the thing is, if the system can learn, okay, he became a browser, and then by detecting the way he communicates with things, the way that he searches things, the digital space, and you can begin to build up a profile of those people. We talked about that profiling people, yeah. So because you can really say, okay, he's looking for this kind of stuff, so and helping them to kind of almost suggest different elements, so depending on his status, if you like, you know, and then you could recreate with some intelligence, some sort of almost like a roadmap for turning into much more engaged users. Yeah, I think that's it's interesting. So my colleague Dulcidi also wants to say something.
Let me just add on Terence's response, and this has specifically to do with this BBC project that we are involved in, and that study is going to be done within this project, because the volcanic eruption is only one of the many stations that will be on a public event, and basically all the users will use an RFID tag that they will need to swipe as they go into each area, and then they can also leave a feedback about their experience. So the idea is that at the end you will collate all the passes of all the participants and get the feedback from that will give you from different components on that exhibition. I don't know if that answers what you were asking.
Just to clarify that.
Yeah.
So this is a part of a larger program with BBC to really looking at how gaming, virtual reality technology could be used to educate community with science kind of stuff. So it's like a week of science festival. There will be different elements. So this is volcanic eruption is one example. There will be several other stuff. So within that kind of a larger exercise, so the people will be given a RFID tag, and then they will be going from one booth to another and looking at this kind of different installations, testing out different aspects. So the RFID tag will allow you to track certain types of behavior, I guess, initially. But that needs to be done over time. You know, what you're talking about is then if you then they come back and re-engage with that game over time, you can begin to really see is he changing? Did he go back and really go into the digital asset management system to find out more about the content? Did he link up with other teams from other organizations? You know what I mean? So you can begin to track whether the behavior is changing as well, I guess. But I think these are interesting things. I mean, as Dulcidi is saying, there'll be some aspects will be, profiling will be done within the BBC Science Week, but I think long term there's interesting works need to be done in terms of monitoring the user behavior. So as I see, although Visionaire is very much focusing on high-end visualization and other stuff, is within this context. What I brought is what I saw in terms of what curators are looking for. They're trying to looking at behavioral change in a way. At the end, how do you really attract people? How do I get people to come continuously to my place? How do you turn them into much more followers and searchers, so that this is where they can build up their community? And that's the curator's view. At the same time, we also work with people who are community groups. They would like to, in a way, opposite. They would like to be the curators. They would like to drive it. They like to contribute more. So that's a little bit of tension in a way between what curators want and what the community groups might want. But I think it's a healthy kind of debate where from technology we can explore how these two groups could eventually lead to new form of museums, I guess.